Welcome back to part 2 of things we wish that we knew when we first started homebrewing. So in part 2, we want to take it a little bit further. You know, in part 1, we covered some of the, not necessarily basics, but like the things that are really, actually looking back, are quite obvious to us now in hindsight, which is obviously a wonderful thing. This video, we want to just share some of the slightly more nuanced or slightly, ever so slightly more advanced thoughts and topics we've got that we wish we'd known and that have actually, on reflection, really helped us grow as homebrewers. Actually, first things first, James, never stop learning.
Yeah.
So all three of us have come from very basics to really quite advanced homebrewing now, and we're still making mistakes and still learning by them. And one of the big things is the rate of change of new ingredients, new process, new equipment entering the homebrew market the whole time, and we've got to keep on learning how to use these new techniques, new evolvements. It's really important. By far and away, we don't know it all at all. We've got so much still to learn because it's such a massive topic base that covers so much. The homebrewing hobby is simply amazing for that fact. There's so much involved in it.
One of the things I remember after I'd got, you know, a few brews under my belt, a few months down the line, experimenting with your recipes, starting to create your own recipes, experimenting with ingredients, you know, trying new bits of kit. You know, I kind of remember I wanted to learn about hops in kind of a little bit more detail than what I was reading on the packet or on the website. I wanted to understand what they did at certain points, what different flavours they all offered. So I did a series of smash beers.
Mate, it's such a great way to start brewing, learning about flavours. Same base malt, swap the hops out, try to make a beer at the same IBU, so the bitterness is the same of the final product, but what it will show you is the different flavours different hops can add. It's a great way to learn.
The same can be said with malt as well, you know, playing around with different malts. Like, actually, we're in a position now where the amount of different ingredients can feel a bit overwhelming and a bit almost bamboozling, right? Breaking it down into those simple things of like base malts, caramel malts, roasted malts, unmalted adjuncts, you know, understanding those groups is a really good starting point. And then swapping around those individual groups dependent on your recipe. So it could be a smash beer that you use in a, you know, you've used a single type of base malt for 4 or 5 different smash beers with different hops to understand the hops. Well, actually, at that point, you can then revisit the one that you liked the most, maybe, and start playing around with a different base malt. You know, you might have used a pale malt. Well, actually, swap it for a Marisotta and see what difference that makes, because within all of the different ingredients or subcategories, there are little subtle nuances that stand out and make that a distinctive product within the range.
If you're just starting right now, I can see how it can be really or how it can seem really quite complex. When we certainly when I started, you didn't buy malt from a specific maltster. You went to a homebrew shop and it was you bought 5 kilos of pale malt and that was it. You didn't actually know where it came from. By adding all those different malts that we're selling now, kind of makes it much more complicated for a newcomer in to kind of understand. You might not understand that Marisotta is a variety of grain that can be malted by 2, 3, 4 different maltsters. Yeah, I can understand why it can seem really complex, but breaking it down, as you've suggested, just makes it feel that bit easier.
And play around, experiment. I love that idea. You know, we've all experimented here with different recipes over the years, whether it's trying to perfect a clone that we're working on or just like our house whatever beer style it is, you know, that we have regularly on at home. It's part of the fun, and actually for me, experiencing the flavors and the nuances between the ingredients is the thing that really got me into homebrewing. You know, that's what I fell in love with, the aromas during brew day, the flavors showing up in the glass, the differences between all of those different things. it really is such an immersive sensory experience when you start experimenting.
Yeah, and it's all part of the creativity. I know I've got fond recollections of me realising there were different varieties of hops, that they came from different places. So I then kind of went on a little journey of like, all right, well, I'm going to do a series of beers using New Zealand hops and trying to understand what the differences were. Then I went for the sea hops from the US. And these series of beers just went on for like a good year, just trying to brew and understand different hops, but then noting down what I liked about those. And then when I was drinking a beer in the pub and it says, oh, it's got this hop in it, oh, I brewed with that. You can kind of get a correlation and kind of link into things that you can get to drink as well.
Right, so actually in part one we talked about like looking after our yeast from a temperature control perspective. Actually, we want to go a little bit further with this next one. It leads directly on from what we were just saying there about some of the other ingredients. Again, we have so many yeasts available to us that really, again, the world is our oyster, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. I think one thing I would advise anybody to do at home, again, is play around with the yeasts that you're using. You know, start with something that's going to be reliable, that's, you know, not going to be too taxing. You haven't got to maybe think about keeping it really cold like a lager yeast, or the dizzying heights of some of the sort of thermotolerant yeast strains. But pick a yeast that's suited to the style of beer that you're trying to brew, and then see how it turns out. But also, probably the most important thing is using enough of that yeast.
Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to reading the back of the packet or the information on the website. So it's really important that you know the pitching rate of that yeast, because they do vary between different yeast manufacturers and different yeast styles. So generally, if you're brewing a lager, you're going to require more yeast than you would do if you're going to be brewing an ale, generally. But that information is all out there on the website or on the back of the packet when you get it. It's so important.
I think the other thing is also thinking about adding nutrients. Yeast needs nutrients. We touched on it in the first part. Yeast is a living organism, so it needs food. Making sure that you give it the food so it does its job correctly is just as important as making sure you've got the right amount of yeast.
One thing I want to draw back to my experience when we're talking about yeast, and you know, for many people, getting into homebrewing is a way to have really tasty beer that per pint is quite affordable, you know, versus maybe how much you used to pay in the pub or in a bottle shop. One thing that, especially very early in your homebrewing career, I would say is don't think about trying to harvest yeast and reuse it at that early stage. You know, I made that mistake. Tried to like scoop out some yeast slurry or pitch wort directly onto the yeast cake from a previous batch that I bottled, and you are opening the door for infection, for contamination, for off flavors, for just, you know, stuff that is really avoidable. And given now that we are in a world where almost every single yeast style is available in a dry format for literally pounds, don't try and mess around with yeast harvesting, because actually it's quite an advanced technique and requires specialist skills and knowledge. Doesn't mean you can't do it. You certainly can.
No, I think actually it's a really good skill to learn, because actually we want to be doing that. Reusing yeast is what commercial breweries do, and you know, is what a lot of home brewers do, and a lot of home brewers do it really successfully. However, there are steps to be taken. You've got to know what you're doing. So just with that, it's not a beginner process.
No. Actually, we were talking about this off camera, and Martin, you said that the most valuable thing with homebrewing is your time.
Yeah.
The time you're putting into it, right?
Yeah, if it's an all grain brewer, that's 5 hours of your day to actually make the wort.
Yeah, and
then the time waiting for it to ferment, and then the time for it to condition. Losing all of that, trying to save £3 on a packet of yeast, just not worth it. I touched on this a little bit earlier about the hops and kind of seeing hops in beers that I'm drinking in the pub. You know, don't stop loving and drinking beer from breweries. You know, you can learn a lot from drinking different beers from different breweries. I kind of remember back that notebook I used to keep all my recipes in, and the back of it, I used to put labels off cans in there from breweries where they would list the malts and the hops. You can kind of learn combinations from those beers and breweries and relate it to your homebrewing.
Yeah, having that aspiration, right? You know, discovery. Many people out there that get into homebrewing, in fact, I'd argue everybody at home that gets into homebrewing, it comes from a love of beer, right? A love of the product in the glass. that you want to try and replicate, whether that's because you're just interested in it or whether it's because, you know, you want to try and save a bit of money versus how much maybe you were spending in the pubs or in the bottle shops. But don't stop enjoying and supporting the beer industry, because, you know, you might be a massive, like, traditional kind of ale lover. Well, there's a world out there that you could dive into that sits beyond that could provide you inspiration, but also understanding that you could take into your home brewing, right?
It's funny, I don't think I can think of one craft brewery that hasn't started as a home brewer. And homebrew, brewing at home, has a massive influence on commercial beer, but it also works the other way around as well. Commercial beer, the excitement of different ingredients and different new flavors, that also has an influence back to new entrants coming into the homebrew world.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the visits we've done to breweries and the videos we've done, the things we've learnt along the way and shared with the community, it's circular. It kind of goes backwards.
Oh, definitely, it kind of ebbs and flows, like homebrew wagging the commercial world dog, or is it the other way around? I don't know. Sometimes, yeah, it just ebbs and flows. Recipe development, as Martin's already touched on, absolutely one of my favourite parts of the homebrewing hobby. And actually, I think it's relatively easy now to start designing your own recipes. There's loads of books out there with information on how to design your recipe, but one of the easiest things to use is one of the free brewing software that's available out there. There are many available. I'm just going to pick on Grainfather because I think it's one of the simplest ones to use. So you add the beer style that you want to make into the software. It then automatically gives you the guidelines for colour, bitterness, ABV, starting gravity, finishing gravity, the whole lot, and it does it on a slider. So you can start adding your ingredients in, you can start adding your malt in and get it to the right ABV to fit the style, the right colour. Just go through the whole recipe and it kind of works it out for you. It's a great way to start.
The other thing as well is, you know, if you're looking at experimenting with different beer styles that you want to brew, you know, the free software like Grainfather, Brewfather, all these other ones that are out there, they're really good at giving you the parameters.
Yeah.
But downloading the free BJCP style guidelines that's available online, I'll put a link down in the description below. You know, you want to start brewing a particular beer style, well, you can look it up in there, and whilst it gives you all those parameters, it also gives you accurate descriptions of what you can expect in the beer.
It also gives you commercial examples of beer that are in that style as well, so that you can go out and purchase them and actually understand what you're reading in the actual glass.
It's just a huge learning opportunity to take your understanding of beer, and I don't mean homebrew in this instance, I mean all beer, to the next level, really, and start learning and absorbing more information.
You can also get an app with the style guides on as well, so you've got it constantly in your pocket, so you can refer to it whenever you've got a moment. So leading on from that knowledge, the other great resource that is out there to homebrewers is the homebrewing community. Homebrew clubs, Facebook groups, you know, all of these little areas where people can kind of get together. I remember kind of going to my first homebrew meeting, and it was just like, well, I'm not the only guy who's doing this. It's like a mix of different people from different walks of life, all brewing different styles of beer, doing it with different bits of kit. Massive learning point.
I think, you know, getting feedback for your beer is really important. Impartial feedback as well is important, because, you know, you make some beer at home and you give it to, you know, your family, your friends. They all like you, mostly, and they'll probably be nice about the beer you're drinking. Also, subconsciously, they will be more likely to approve of it because they know and like you.
You're giving them free beer; they're going to like it. It's a win-win.
But joining a homebrew group, or, you know, entering into a competition, even, you're getting impartial feedback, right? But the thing, actually, that I don't think we talk about enough, that stands out for me about joining communities like local homebrew groups, is that it's a space for people to come together, right? And that actually, for me, is incredibly important for just having a good, safe space where you've got people that have got shared interests that you can get to know, understand, and learn from, but also just share some of your life experiences with.
And you also get to do that really weird thing, drinking your own beer in the pub.
Sometimes also things go wrong. Shit happens occasionally, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. We've all had drain pour beers.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing about it is that because we've written copious notes, which we've also talked about, we kind of get a picture of how, why, or where it went wrong in the process.
Yeah.
That getting it wrong is all part of the journey of learning, finding out why that mistake was made. It's just part of homebrewing.
Not being disheartened by that is really important. I mean, we've all, like you said, had drain pours. I've even had a G30 fall over during the boil and damaged my grainfather, and I lost my entire brew day. And it also burnt my it burnt my lawn. I had a massive scald mark on my lawn. Luckily, no one was hurt, but I learned from that, right? Things go wrong, learn from it, move on, don't get disheartened, keep brewing, right? Keep brewing.
Each one of those bad brew day experiences is a learning point to kind of grow and get better. I've had recently actually, I had 3 brews in a row where they're all just straight down the drain because it didn't go as it was planned. Take yourself out of it, look at your notes, assess it, brew something different, come back to it. Don't give up.
It's funny because we can have certain things that sometimes that brew day is done in a bit of a rush as well. You get, or not all of it, but certain parts of it maybe. Quite often that certain part is the end. Not rushing the end of a brew day is so important because actually I've just spent 5 hours making that work, and just one mistake right at the end, such as leaving the tap open on a fermenter whilst I'm filling it from the kettle.
We've all done it.
And I've come back and actually I'm thinking, why is my patio wet? Well, it's wet because I've just emptied my complete 20 litres of wort all over it and started crying because it's really heartbreaking. So it's just that taking your time just to think about exactly what you're doing is really important.
Double check, right?
Yeah. I really hope you've enjoyed us sharing some of our experiences, some of our knowledge, which we keep on gaining right throughout our homebrew career. But we're really interested to know what questions you have. We'd really like to understand the mistakes that you've made, the great things that have happened to you, how you've really improved your homebrew. So knock us up in the comments below.
Now, if you're at the end of the video and you're not already, please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell for notifications so you can keep up to date with all of the fun we have here at Malt Miller HQ. Also, if you are new to the channel, look back through our catalogue. We have hundreds of videos available for you to learn and grow in your homebrewing journey from. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, TikTok. And as ever, have a great brew.
Cheers.